It's time to get started. I'd like the record to indicate all school board members are present, as is Tanya Baker, clerk, Haiti Robinson, superintendent, and Scott Mullins, school board attorney. I'd ask everyone to stand for a pledge of allegiance and a moment of silence. Thank you. We have an agenda in front of us. Is there any change to that?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we would like in closed session number 3 to consult with legal counsel and receive briefings by staff members pertaining to actual litigation with the Board of Supervisors. For that to be removed from closed session, please.
So remove item 3, right?
Yes, sir. Item 3.
The first item on the agenda is SCANSCO report. Let's back up a moment. We need to approve the agenda as changed.
I so moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Now, for some reason I don't do that too often, do I? Item number 2, SCANSCO report.
Okay. And Mr. Ellswick, welcome. Board members, Curtis Ellswick with SCANSCO will be here today with us this evening to present the report, his report, and also an update on the PPA process. Welcome, sir. Excuse me, Mr. Right. Push that little bit. There you go. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Mr. Chair, members of the school board. It's great to be here again and to provide an update on the PPA process. I have prepared a memo that I believe everyone has a copy of. And so my agenda tonight is to go through that memo.
I have it.
Scott has it. Okay.
Mr. Elder says he prepared it. I think he was working on it most all afternoon. It's pretty warm off the press.
Thank you.
Hot off the press this afternoon.
Excuse me, could Mr. Ellswick microphone just be a little bit louder? Thank you.
It's my Buchanan County voice. So as you recall, on June 9th, a few weeks back, the school board held a public hearing on the PPA process, and there was discussion was around the proposals that you received for design and construction of a new elementary school. Since that time, we have been working with Questenberry's and negotiating an interim agreement for design and pre-construction phase services for the school. They have also have been doing their own due diligence. They've actually been visiting potential sites, doing some preliminary design work, talking to the Army Corps of Engineers, talking to Virginia Department of Environmental Quality, getting pricing from local trade contractors, and doing as much due diligence as they can to present more information to us to consider when evaluating sites. We as the school board and SCANSCO also held a call with the Corps in the past maybe 2 weeks ago to talk about the NEPA, the environmental permitting process, so that we were all on the same page and understood what their expectations were. Based on those discussions and that due diligence that Questenberry's has been doing and we have been doing as well, they presented an evaluation of the 3 sites that we've been potentially looking at. Those are the Clinch Cove, the Ridgeview, and the Upper Backbone site. What they looked at was the implications of schedule. If you build a new elementary school on each one of those sites, what are the pros and cons of that? What are the challenges? They also looked at the estimated cost for site development at each one of those sites, doing an independent evaluation of those. and they provided us a summary. So I wanted to walk through their summary findings and present those tonight for consideration. Regarding schedule, the first site that I'll talk about is Clinchco. And the one concern that came up even with the call when we're talking with the Army Corps of Engineers is that there's a dump site or a landfill near the Clinchco site. And so the scope of what kind of remediation would be needed is unknown at this time, but it does pose significant cost and schedule impacts if there is any remediation, which the Corps believes there probably will be. Other challenges on that site is the potential need to replace a 72-inch drainage structure and just the amount of unsuitable materials that may need to be replaced during the excavation of that site. Talking with the Corps, this site is anticipated to require an extensive NEPA environmental permitting process that could take at least 1 year, if not longer. And that means we cannot start any construction but a shovel in the ground until that permit is in place. Questenberry's, in looking at those considerations, they anticipate that the earliest that construction could be complete if you build on that site is around March of 2023. But that is without any delays with having to remediate any hazardous materials or have to deal with any unsuitable materials. Regarding the Ridgeview site, potential challenges there are the relocation of some existing utilities next to the existing school that we're standing in and tie-ins to those utilities. Potential expansion of stormwater facilities. We may have to expand some of the stormwater ponds, possibly. And then they have to look into the capacity of the existing sewage treatment plant that's on site. In talking with the Corps of Engineers, they indicated that we would not necessarily have to follow the full-blown NEPA process as we would like on Clinchco. We would have to do some surveys, some studies to validate any updates since Ridgeview was looked at in the NEPA process that was undertaken here. But that could probably be done within 6 months. Based on that, Questenberry's is estimated that they can complete construction of an elementary school on the Ridgeview site around August of 2022, which is about 2 years from now. That is if design can commence this month. At the Upper Backbone site, the extent of the site development is even more excessive than the Clinchco site with the amount of excavation and cut and fill that would be required. Similar concerns with the NEPA permitting process. It would take at least 1 year, probably more than a year, to go through that process on that site because no environmental assessments have been done. Questenberry's is telling us that the best case for completion of a school on that site is summer of 2023, which is 3 years from now, and that's assuming that they don't run into any environmental or unforeseen site conditions that we're not aware of right now. Regarding costs for site development, and this is site development only, this does not include the building or what we call site improvements, which are parking lots and site lighting, sidewalks, those kind of things. At the Clinchco site, the estimate that we've gotten back from Questenberry's, which is based on the due diligence that they've done, talking with local site contractors, that is a little over $3 million, and that does not include any hazardous material remediation or unforeseen conditions. Ridgeview is about a little over $1.3 million, which is a little less than half of the Clinchco site. And Upper Backbone is almost $6 million, a little over $5.9 million. And that's without any unforeseen environmental remediation or unforeseen conditions. I did include a summary of the schedule and the costs in the memo in a little table to kind of make it simple, but considering the additional costs of having to build the building, the site improvements, the soft costs, the testing, inspections, furniture, technology, all the other things that have to go into a school, and the amount of money that you have available from the Corps, which is a little over $24.5 million, as well as the need to move the project forward to avoid additional escalation and negative impact to the schedule. It is Skanska's recommendation that the school board select a site that can accommodate a new elementary school within the limits of funding that is available from the Corps of Engineers. Um, I'll expand on that a little bit, that we're still negotiating with Questenberry's on what the final cost of the building, the site, would be. And so I don't have those numbers today, but based on the previous presentations that I've made and what we had estimated for site costs, based on, in comparison to what Questenberry's has done in the last month with their due diligence, their site cost numbers are actually higher than what we've been estimating. Which tells us, based on the studies that we've done, that the only site that is actually affordable within the funding you have is Ridgeview. We are exceeding the amount even for Clinchco at this point, without the unknowns of environmental or unforeseen conditions. So with that, I'll leave it up to you to ask me any questions you like.
Is there any questions or comments from Mr. Ellswick?
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question or two, please? Is my microphone working?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
it is.
Mr. Ellswick, the additional information that would basically be the cost of the school itself, the brick and mortar costs and the soft costs and everything else that it requires to build a school. Have you negotiated enough with Questenberry to sort of have an understanding of the range that they're looking at as far as presenting a proposal?
Yes, we actually got some numbers today. We got some numbers yesterday, and we have been negotiating some of those. Some of those costs have come down. We haven't had a chance to go all the way through the whole estimate. They provided a lot of detail. But based on the number we are seeing, it's over what we were estimating, is what we were seeing and presented a few months back.
Okay, so as we go through the negotiating process, those numbers will go up or down some depending upon our effectiveness in negotiating, but there is a range that you realize it will not go beyond. There's a bottom to their willingness to negotiate.
Yeah, so we have to keep in mind we have a set budget. So they have to be able to work a number that'll work within the $24.5 million, or we don't have a contract, in essence.
So are these numbers that we're looking at here tonight, how are they, Thompson and Litton did a study before you had presented to this board about the average square foot of construction. How is the information that you're getting from Questenberry lining up to the prior information that you had?
So the cost per square foot of the school is pretty consistent. And the site cost, when they evaluated the Thompson-Litton study, which was very thorough. They've done their own investigation. They've had site contractors meet them at the sites, walk the sites. Actually, there's a lot of detail and quantities of units of everything that they anticipate. Size of the parking lot, utilities, how much excavation is going to be required. There's a lot of detail.
They had crews out at all three sites.
Yeah, that's my understanding. Yeah, and that based on their more in-depth study of those sites, those numbers are coming in higher than what we were anticipating.
As I recall, the last presentations you've done, it showed Upper Backbone being over budget. I think it started out 2.6 million over back in November of 2018. Then recently with escalation, it came up more. And just the Clinchco side, I guess as I recall, there was a discussion about it was sort of on the bubble. Correct. But by the prior information, it was very marginal as to whether we could do it. Can you give the board some sort of an idea of how much over the bubble it is now by the information that you have?
I don't have an exact number. I think what we've learned since the last time we presented cost information on Clinchco was that there is a landfill nearby and that there may be some contaminated soils that will have to be remediated. So there's that additional cost that was not in our numbers before. So that is one concern. I just think that the design and construction team have done a more in-depth quantity takeoff of what's going to be required to build a school there, and it drove the numbers up. At the time, the last time we presented this, I think it was in May, we were at the point that if we didn't make a decision in 3 or 4 months, escalation was going to eat us up to the point where it's either clinch, probably about now, since then, or maybe in a month or two, that Clinchco is going to be unaffordable anyway. And so when you throw in, we may have to do, remediate contaminated soils. Some of their site costs have gone up. We're over that now.
And so just so the board will understand, it's the Lane Group that's primarily responsible for that issue with this PPA proposer.
Yes.
And the Lane Group participated in a phone call with the Army Corps of Engineers team that's primarily responsible for the NEPA and putting this together. And after that discussion, that was her concern?
Yes. And after a call with the Department of Environmental Quality as well, when you deal with stormwater. So.
And so in a little while, on the board's agenda, we're going to go into closed session to discuss how we might go about negotiating with Quisenberry to enter into an interim agreement that would include design. So that, just so the board will know, we're going to go in closed session to talk about those negotiations. But for the public and for open session and just making sure that we're communicating appropriately and plainly, Upper Backbone is significantly over budget at this point.
Correct.
Is there some estimate of how over budget that would be if we were building a 500 student school with these numbers?
Like I said, we're still negotiating the overall cost with Quisenberry's, but and I don't have the previous presentation in front of me.
I'm not looking for exact, just a range or some good estimate.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what that number
Okay.
was in May.
So
But at that time, it was way over budget, and now it's more over budget.
right, okay, and so I won't go through each one of them, but ultimately, the plan, as I understand it, would be for us to go in closed session and make sure we're on the same page as far as our negotiations with Quisenberry, and then for us to work with Mr. Phillips and the county administrator's team, because they need to review and approve anything that we would do. And then assuming that after the negotiations are over with Quisenberry and we had an agreement that was acceptable to the Board of Supervisors, then and only then would we actually be entering into an interim agreement.
Correct.
And that would be at a special call meeting in a week or two from today, depending on how quickly the Board of Supervisors can get back to us.
Correct. And there's you have to wait 30 days after the public hearing before you can execute that, which is around July 9th. So
Right.
it'd have to be after that date anyway.
And when you come back the next time and we're actually going over the interim agreement, the information that right now you're negotiating with Quisenberry about, that information would then be available, and you could tell us specifically how what the contract price would be or how much over we would be with those other sites.
Exactly. With the caveat that we need to pick a site because that's what their number will be based on.
So, and I think that's important for the board to understand, is that we are looking at design services, right? That's what we're looking to get done. And I take it that designing a school at Ridgeview might be different from designing one at Clinchco.
Correct. Especially from the civil engineering standpoint.
And so for the public's and for the board's clarity, I mean, could you give them some idea of your comfort level that Clinchco would in fact be over budget?
Based on the numbers that I've seen from Quisenberry's, which are slightly higher than the numbers I presented 4 months ago, and the unknowns of what contamination we may run into, Even if we didn't run into contamination, I think it's too risky.
I'm sorry, members of the board, I just wanted to ask, I think some of the more obvious questions, if you certainly feel free to ask their own questions. And also, Mr. Elzick will be going with us back in closed session, and if there is additional information you think of, we can still come back out in open session and ask Mr. Elzick questions.
Mr. Ellsworth, have they given a scope of maybe how much of that hazardous materials or how much cubic yards of dirt would have to be moved or remediated at the Clinchco site?
Not in terms of the remediation.
Right.
Until we do more investigation and start the study. We have, how much they intend to excavate,
Right.
but not remediate.
So it could be a little or a lot at this
It could be.
point in
That's
time.
the risky part. If it's a lot, we could blow our budget really quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Ellswick. I believe that brings us down to item 3, closed session. I move we convene a closed meeting for the purpose of employment, discussion, or consideration of specific individuals. 6 teachers at Sand Lick Elementary School and Irvington Elementary School, substitute bus driver, transfer of a special education teacher from Ridgeview Middle School to Ridgeview High School in regarding the resignation of a teacher pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A1 of the Code of Virginia. And number 2, discussion and consideration of terms of a potential interim agreement with the Quisenberry OWPR Lane Group for the construction of a new elementary school involving the investment of public funds pursuant to a PPEA procurement where competition and bargaining are involved, where the interests of the school system would be adversely affected if these discussions were made public initially pursuant to 2.2-3711A6 of the Code of Virginia. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. We're in closed session.